What's up, everybody, and welcome to Bible study. This week I'm Scott and joined by Woody, which is an awesome treat for all of us.
Oh, you're too kind.
Yeah. Today we are going to be looking at Proverbs chapter 3. There's a verse in here that most all of you have probably heard in one way, shape, or form. But we're going to kind of look at this passage, talk a little bit about Proverbs. So we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 3. We're going to start in verse 1. We're going to read down to that verse and then kind of talk a little bit about Proverbs and then kind of, peek around at some other things in Proverbs 3 that I think are really interesting for us today. So if you have a Bible, either on your phone or somewhere else, you want to open with us to Proverbs chapter 3, right after Psalms. Starting in verse 1. My son, don't forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commands. For they will bring you many days, a full life and well-being. Never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you. Tie them around your neck. Write them on a table on your heart. Then you will find favor and high regard with God and people. Trust the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways know him, and he will make your paths straight. So, most of you have probably heard at some point in your church career that verse 5 there, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own understanding. Mm-hmm. When we ask, what's your favorite Bible verse, that one's brought up an awful lot.
Yeah.
But, Proverbs is an interesting book that I think kind of often, I don't want to say it gets overlooked, but I think we kind of go into Proverbs and pick and choose passages out that we like.
Definitely.
And we do that with a lot of books. But for Proverbs in general, there's basically a main point that Proverbs is talking about. It's an entire book about trying to help us gain wisdom and how to understand how to go and find wisdom. But it's kind of unique how it talks about the person who is wise, and then the opposite of that, the person who is a fool that's used here. So the wise person is actually the person that raises their hand and realizes that, hey, there's a lot of things I don't know. And the fool would be someone who acts like they know everything. And
which is kind of the opposite for what you'd expect, because normally the wise person is someone you'd expect to have all the answers,
right.
And the fool is someone who really doesn't know anything. But Proverbs kind of switches the game on us and says, hey, to be wise, really you need to accept the fact that you don't and you can't know everything.
Yeah. There's so much you don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think, we were talking about this before we started. There's so many things kind of in our modern day context of where we are right now, especially here in America, where I feel like we have a lot of people going around pretending or believing that they know everything. Mm-hmm. You've probably seen this on the internet. Different people will say speaking boldly, proclaiming truth about the virus that's going around, quoting stats from articles, doing all these other things. And most of these people, have never studied a virus in their life. B,
right.
don't understand epidemics, or C, don't understand vaccines, treatments, or anything like that, or how they actually work. They're not scientists. They're not experts. And when the actual experts say, hey, look, guys, there's a lot we don't know, then most likely the people that we see in the grocery store, at church, and all these other places don't know either. But yet we talk like we do know what we're talking about.
Right.
And the same thing is true for, politics.
Mm-hmm.
This could be our only Bible study after I say this, but we have this system of politics currently where we have two parties, and they seem to be. It used to be that maybe the Republicans and Democrats were kind of closer in what they thought than maybe each of them would like to admit. But now it seems like we're on two different ends of the spectrum.
Right. Things have become so polarized, especially,
yes.
I feel like over the past couple of years even.
They have, yeah. So polarized where, people who are Republicans believe this is the way, the truth, and the light, and this is how you run a government. And Democrats believe the same thing, but in a completely different way. And there's not really a lot of room for any sort of nuance or something in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that, all right, both these parties think that they are, the greatest thing ever. Yet, somehow, some way, we still have presidents from both parties that get elected. We still have Congress that shifts back and forth every
Right.
2, 4, 6 years, or however many years it is. We still have this moment. So obviously, both parties don't have it completely figured out, because if they did, then why we have elections where the other party gets elected?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, just maybe, that both of these thought processes don't work for everyone. Maybe, just maybe, we're not as smart as we think we are.
Right.
And, I think that's kind of the point of Proverbs, and I don't think there's ever been a time in our history where this was more important than realizing there's so many things we don't know. There's so many things that we don't understand.
Right. And I think that, whether it's politics or your thoughts on a global pandemic, whenever you cross into that ground of, I know everything and I'm right, and you're on the wrong side, I'm on the right side, that's where we enter kind of this dangerous area that inhibits us really from acting like this passage of Proverbs tells us to do, which is trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own understanding. Which, if you really think about it, and Scott and I, we were talking about this a little bit, but that's like almost an impossible ask.
Yes. Yeah, that's, listen, I had to write some papers for ordination in the United Methodist Church, and one of the things that I mentioned in there was one of my weaknesses. One of my big weaknesses is, like, I like having control over everything. I like to really rely on what I know and what I can control. And when there's something that I can, or something that I don't understand, it really, really affects me in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
And this passage, it's one of those things, it's one of those verses that we've read a million times. And sometimes when you do that, you can kind of like often overlook. It's like John 3:16.
Right.
And you can often sort of overlook how incredibly important it is, but also how difficult it is, like you're saying. Because you're basically saying, listen, trust God, and just rely on that. Rely on that faith and in that knowledge. And don't worry about the fact that there are things that happen that you don't understand. Mm-hmm. And that is horrifically difficult, especially in a time like this where there's so many things going on, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's political polarization, whether it's racial injustice, all these different things that are going on in the world today that you're like, man, what is this about?
Yeah.
And there's just things in this world that we're not going to understand, but it's weird that like that's what the whole point of this whole book is trying to get you to do. It's like raise your hand and say, okay, I don't get it.
Right.
I don't get it. And relying on God to kind of fill in those gaps for you.
Yeah, and if you look at the next verse even, it says, in all your ways know him, and he will make your path straight, which is kind of saying, rely on God, let him take care of everything, and he'll kind of show you the right way.
Yeah. I mean, and like I always say when we read verses like this, doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
No.
It says make your path straight, but even a straight path, there can be difficult times. One of the things I've kept going back to, and we'll kind of wrap it up here, is in Psalm 23. As I've thought a lot about this, especially in the past 4 or 5 months, as we've gone through quarantine, and then all these other things we've had to deal with, things getting canceled, the pain and suffering that's kind of come with that, and all the other difficult things that our world deals with on a daily basis, is that if you read Psalm 23, it talks about the Lord is the one that leads us beside the still waters and lays us down in the green pastures, and those are like these beautiful images of peace and tranquility. But it also talks about even though I walk through the darkest valley, or the valley of the shadow of death, some translations say it. I'll fear no evil, for you're with me. And everybody's like, yeah, that's awesome. But you're still walking through the valley of the shadow of death,
exactly,
which is not a fun place.
Mm-hmm.
No one's ever like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that we're vacationing in the valley of the shadow of death. No, you want to be, in the green pastures or by the still waters. And so just because there's a straight path that the Lord is going to take us on doesn't mean there's not going to be these dark valleys that we go through. And it just kind of feels like we've been in one of those dark valleys for a long time now. Mm-hmm. But the truth of that passage is that we know that there's green pastures and still waters on the other side of that. So any other thoughts about this passage? Or
I mean, kind of like you were saying, I think something that I've clung to over the past few years is, this idea that God never promises us that it's going to be easy, but he promises that He's going to be with us every step of the way. And so whatever this season has in store for us, whatever the next couple weeks or maybe longer than that, who knows? I think it's important to take heart in the fact that God is with us always.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, guys, we love you. If you got any questions about anything that we talk about here, any questions about anything, you can definitely email us, call us, whatever you need to do. We're going to be doing these things every single week. They'll be on our YouTube channel. They'll also be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can listen to the audio version while you drive or anything like that. But we're thankful for you, and we're praying for you guys, and we will see you soon.
See you soon.